The Georgia Bulldogs are on a heater. After landing a commitment from five-star edge Isaiah Gibson on Monday, UGA now has the number 2 ranked class in America. Yeah, Ohio State's still sitting there at number 1, but for how long? In this video, we're going to find out who could be Georgia's next big commitment. I got Jake Rowe from Dogs HQ on this one. But first, Georgia fans, this is an exciting time. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the On3 Recruits channel. We're here talking Dogs recruiting the entire offseason. Go ahead, hit subscribe. All right, let's bring on my guy Jake Rowe from Dogs HQ. Jake, I'm going to throw out some names. We're going to find out who could be next. So let's just start with five-star defensive lineman Justice Terry. And I want to start with him because he decommitted from USC right in the same 24-hour time span that Isaiah Gibson did, but he decided instead of going to Georgia last weekend, he took a visit to Alabama. So where do things stand with Justice Terry in Georgia?
Well, I mean, I still really like Georgia's chances for Justice Terry. I mean, I think Georgia is objectively the leader here. Now, I do believe Alabama's a threat. Anytime you go on campus in Tuscaloosa and you kind of see what they have to offer, even with Kalen DeBoer and the Nick Saban change and all that stuff, I mean, it's a fantastic place, and there's no doubt in my mind that Alabama is in the mix here. Yeah. I do think Alabama is probably Georgia's biggest threat, but I also get the feeling that Georgia is significantly out front right now. Now, does that mean that there's nobody else in competition? Not quite, but I do think that the sooner the better for Georgia. But whoever, whether it's Alabama, whether it's another school that really jumps into the mix, I feel like whoever does it's got a lot of ground to make up.
Yeah, I feel like you're being polite giving Alabama credit here. Justice Terry, this one is all Georgia. But the question is, when do you think he'll be ready to make that decision?
You know, I don't think he's in any kind of hurry right now. Now, does that mean that Georgia could get him in a hurry if they really probably? I mean, they're pretty persuasive in that regard. Kirby Smart kind of made it happen really quick there with Isaiah Gibson. I know back when Justice Terry took his official visit to Georgia, there was some buzz there that Georgia was it going to get him. That's when he was still committed to USC. I think Georgia's in a great spot here. You never say never, but I don't know that there's a timeline in his head right now, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And ultimately it's going to come down to whether the way he's recruited and whether Georgia can completely sell him and kind of just, get that thing over the hump and get him on the commitment list.
Yeah, and that's understandable. I mean, he was committed to USC for 3 or 4 months, so he's just fresh off that. It's been about 7 or 8 days. So Justice Terry, I like where Georgia sits, but yeah, I could understand him wanting to take a little bit more time. How about Bryce Davis, a really nice-looking edge prospect out of Greensboro, North Carolina? He's the number 9 ranked edge in the country, and he's just coming off this Georgia visit. Where do you think the Dogs sit with him, and could this be one where he's on that commit list soon?
I like Georgia in this one right now as well. The problem is, okay, so there's a couple things at play here. Number one, kudos to South Carolina. They weren't in the top 3. They found a way to get him on campus for an official visit, and I've heard some chatter since then that South Carolina really kind of made a move for him. Clemson is also in the mix. I think it's probably Georgia, South Carolina, or Clemson. I don't really think Duke is a big-time factor in this one at this point. I like Georgia kind of having the nose, maybe head and shoulders a little bit out in front right now. But we're talking about a numbers issue for Georgia. You land Isaiah Gibson. You got Darren Akinabon in the mix already. Julius Holly is going to go sooner than Bryce Davis. Julius Holly, I believe, is going to go toward the end of this month, maybe. That one is going to be interesting because, Holly's a guy that his arrow is pointing up, man. I mean, his arrow is pointing up. We saw him at the Under Armour camp. I had a conversation with Charles Power about him. He's a fantastic player. He's a high upside guy, but Georgia has put in a lot of time and a lot of effort into Bryce Davis over a year, like 18 months, really. So I'm really interested to see how that one plays out because I don't see Georgia taking 4 guys at that, edge, even if it's a combo edge 5 technique type thing. So what are they going to decide to do with Julius Holly? We may have an answer based on, that, or they could, essentially try to take 3 or 4, at that position. So that's a numbers issue that Georgia's got to work out. But I really do, Josh, have a hard time seeing Georgia spend a year and a half recruiting this top shelf, one of the better edge prospects in the country, only to kind of fill up before they get a chance to get him on the list.
Hey, you can't take everybody, so we'll see how this one shakes out. First
That's right.
come, first serve. Now, the two Georgia prospects that decommitted from USC last week did not deter Elijah Griffin from continuing to visit USC. He was out in California last weekend. I felt like Elijah Griffin has been trending heavily to UGA throughout the summer. Where do you think things stand? Did USC make an impact here, or is Georgia still sitting pretty?
Man, anytime I know how I sound, I know how I look. I like LA. Okay, I love LA. I think it's awesome. I can't fault any of these kids for going out there and falling in love with it. So I'm sure he had a great time. I'm sure USC used to be in the mix. That's a storied program with a lot of good things to offer. I don't see Elijah Griffin ending up anywhere else other than Georgia. Okay. For the longest time, I feel like there's a connection there. There's a lot of legwork. You've seen people come and go. You've seen South Carolina come and go. Clemson, I think, took a really big swing at him, kind of faded back to the background. Georgia has really stood there kind of at the top of that recruitment for a very long time, and I'm just going to be surprised if he doesn't end up at Georgia.
Yeah, I feel the same sentiment. I would be shocked if he didn't end up at Georgia.
Yeah.
Just want to see where your head was at after that USC visit. Speaking of big-time targets taking visits to other schools, David Sanders, after visits to UGA, Tennessee, he was at Ohio State over the weekend. Now, we think that this could be maybe his final visit before a decision. That depends when this decision comes, because he could take one more visit at the end of July, because there is one visit weekend there. So we'll see how that works out. But what's your thoughts on David Sanders? Because technically maybe he could come off the board in the next month.
I don't see Georgia landing David Sanders right now. I think they're still in the mix. I think Georgia, if it has any cards left to play, which none of us know, then maybe, right? I mean, if they've kind of held something back and they're going to make a late push here, maybe that gets them back in the mix. But it seems like this one's been trending away from Georgia. Ohio State, Tennessee, both of those schools like really all in there with him. I mean, Georgia's been all in too. They've recruited him extremely hard. But it just seems like Georgia's kind of faded to the background. And the funny thing is Georgia's kind of faded. Clemson's kind of faded. And the Johnny-come-latelys in a sense with Ohio State and Tennessee have been the teams that are standing there at the top. It makes you wonder if there's another twist or a turn in this recruitment. Honestly, man, I met this kid at Under Armour a couple years ago, I guess in 2023. I met his family. I thought it would be kind of a very low-key, very quiet recruitment, and it's actually turned out to be a very entertaining, very kind of twisty and turny type deal. So I'm fascinated by how it's turned out, and I'm honestly wondering if there's another twist or turn in this whole thing.
All right, let's stay in the trenches on the offensive side of the ball in the ever-important center position. And I'm looking at Cortez Smith here. He's a 4-star from Parkview High School. Does he fit in the class? And maybe, do you think Cortez Smith could be the next to commit?
I think Cortez Smith has one of the safest spots in this Georgia class right now. I mean, Georgia loves him at center. Georgia needs a center. And I think Cortez Smith is the guy that they have kind of tabbed as the center of the future. I mean, he's a guy that he doesn't fit. When you look at a Georgia offensive line, look at the class Georgia signed in 2024, right? It was 6'6", 6'7", 340 pounds. Well, yeah. Cortez Smith is in that 6'2" range. He's 295, 300, maybe 310.
Right.
Obviously, you've got some different plans for that guy. Georgia likes that mold at center. They've used it really well. I mean, Jared Wilson's going to start for him this year in that mold. Cedric Van Pran was kind of in that role. Warren Erickson played center for Georgia. I mean, you go on and on. I think Cortez Smith has basically one of the safest, little tunnels into this Georgia class, and I do see him committing to Georgia next month.
Awesome. So he could be the next. So I just noticed we went really trench heavy. So Georgia fans, let's hear from you guys. Comment section below. Give your thoughts on who could be the next non-trench recruit to commit to Georgia. We want to hear it from you. Let us know. Comment section below. Well, you've made it to the end of today's video, but there's hundreds more videos on the On3 Recruits channel for you to check out. And also, while you're here, hit subscribe.